When vegans challenge carnism, the system fights back. One of the most powerful tools it uses is projection, which means assigning negative traits to vegans so people can dismiss the message without engaging with it. If you've ever been labelled with a negative vegan stereotype and you think you might have handled it better, stick around. This one's for you. Welcome, and welcome back if you're a regular. I'm Anita, the Vegan Mindset Coach, and I created Unstoppable Vegans to help us survive and thrive in a non-vegan world, while also being effective advocates for animals and for ourselves. I do these trainings weekly inside our Facebook community, and as of recently, I also started sharing these recordings to YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, do drop your comments and your questions below the video. And if you're watching on YouTube, commenting is turned off for you, but you will find all the ways to contact me on my channel. Now, projection is one of the 6 cognitive distortions that carnism employs to control the minds of non-vegans. The first 3 distortions cause people to defend animal exploitation, while the last 3 distortions cause them to attack vegans and veganism. This video is part of a series in which I address each of the 6 cognitive distortions of carnism and share how to dismantle the myths that underpin each of them. Dismantling the myths helps people to recognize their own cognitive distortions and start to see them for what they are, which is biased and inaccurate beliefs, rather than the truth, which is what they previously thought. Projection is a cognitive distortion that causes people to essentially shoot the messenger. It's a convenient one because if they shoot the messenger, they can focus their attention on the mess that they've made of the messenger instead of on the implications of the actual message. In other words, it's a diversion tactic. If people can focus on you and your perceived flaws, they don't have to face the truth about animals. So projection protects the system by making vegans look bad. Okay, so let's look at the common stereotypes projected onto vegans. I'm sure you've heard lots of these. If you're on Facebook, do drop any additional ones in the comments. Vegans are angry. Vegans are judgmental. Vegans are extreme. Vegans are unrealistic. Vegans are so privileged. I mean, who can actually afford to buy beans? Vegans hate farmers. Vegans think they're better than everyone else. Vegans are emotional, irrational, or even mentally ill because, yes, they like to pathologize us. And vegans want to force everyone to be like them, which is clearly horrible. Okay, so what is happening here is that someone observes a behavior exhibited by a vegan and turns that into a negative personality trait. And then they apply it to all vegans. So when a vegan becomes angered by the injustice being done to non-human animals, in the mind of the non-vegan observing this anger, all vegans are now simply angry people. Or when a vegan points out the inconsistency between the values and the actions of a person who calls themselves an animal lover, but then also eats animals, that person may feel judged or even shamed by that vegan. And then they decide that vegans as a group are judgmental and morally superior, which means, they all think that they are better than everyone else. Now, these stereotypes reduce all vegans to just a one-dimensional caricature in the minds of non-vegans, right? So these stereotypes are system-preserving myths designed to make people feel justified in dismissing us and our message. Like all myths of carnism, they are spread intentionally by those who have a vested interest in preserving that dominant oppressive system. and they are internalized by the majority of people, for whom it's a relief to have a reason to dismiss the truth tellers rather than grapple with the truth itself. So when people label us with these stereotypes, it's important for us to understand these are defensive reactions, not personal attacks, although they feel rather personal when they're directed at you. So why is projection so effective for carnism? Well, there are two solid psychological reasons. The first is that projection creates emotional distance between vegans and non-vegans. If vegans are known to be irrational, angry, or judgmental, then people are likely to be on their guard when talking to us, right? They are more likely to avoid deeper conversations with us in case they cop some of that legendary hostility. And if we can't connect with people because they're keeping us at arm's distance, our message isn't going to get through. Okay, so that's the first psychological mechanism, is keeping that emotional distance. The second mechanism behind projection is that actually flips the moral spotlight from non-vegans to vegans. Okay, and it does that by focusing on vegans' supposed shortcomings, by putting our tone, our personality, and our behavior under the microscope. It detracts attention from the real issue, which is, of course, animal exploitation and suffering. So projection thereby protects people from the discomfort of dealing with the truth. Now, avoidance of discomfort is one of the most powerful, I'd say the most powerful motivator of human behavior. People will go to enormous lengths to avoid discomfort. And projection makes it easy for them, because if vegans are the problem, then they don't have to examine their own choices. If vegans are discredited, carnism stays unchallenged. Projection keeps the system intact, so it's important for us to recognize it and counter it effectively. So how do we counter projection? I'm going to share with you 3 communication strategies right now that are effective counters to projection. They directly address the 2 psychological mechanisms that I just mentioned, okay, which make projection so effective in the service of carnism. So these 3 strategies very effectively counter distancing and diversion. Okay, so projection works by creating distance between vegans and non-vegans, and by effectively changing the subject away from an area of discomfort for non-vegans. So the strategies I'm sharing here are about guiding people back onto topic and creating connection instead of distance. So connection, safety, mutual understanding, right? These are needed for people to be able to hear our message. Okay, so strategy number 1, name and reframe the stereotype. The reason this is important is that when someone stereotypes you, what is actually happening is that they are labeling you with a negative character trait. And they're doing that in order to turn you into the bad guy, which allows them to feel justified in dismissing whatever you have to say, because we don't have to listen to the bad guy, right? To catch and to counter this, you can very calmly name what they are doing and then reframe that stereotype that they're applying to you from a negative character trait into a positive attribute or value that the non-vegan can actually agree with. Okay, so I'll share with you some examples here. Let's say someone says to you, "You vegans think you're better than everyone else." Now, in counter to this, you might say, "Oh, it seems like you believe that all vegans are judgmental." Now, I'm not judging you. On the contrary, I'm simply observing that you are a good person who values kindness and compassion, and I appreciate that it must feel uncomfortable to have your actions be out of alignment with your values. Right? Now, they've tried to shoot the messenger, but they didn't succeed. The messenger is well and truly alive and focused on the message. Okay, so let me give you another example. If they say, you vegans are anti-farmer, you want to destroy the livelihood of farmers. I've heard this one several times. In response to this, you might say, it seems like you believe that vegans hate farmers. We don't hate farmers. We all want to eat. I'm for farmers. I'm simply against harming animals, and I believe you are too. Okay, now this same point can be made in any scenario where you're accused of being anti anything, right? So whether it's anti-culture, anti-tradition, anti-religion, anywhere where veganism appears in their mind to be opposing some institution that they're very attached to, we can simply say, it seems that you think vegans hate religion, or vegans are against culture, or vegans are opposed to tradition. We're not opposed to those things. I'm not opposed to those things. I'm just against harming animals, and I believe you are too, right? And when we add that I believe you are too, it actually helps to start bring them on board, right? It demonstrates that we actually have some shared values, or it implies that we believe that they and us are actually more alike than maybe they thought, okay? So what's another example? If they say, you vegans are too emotional or hysterical or irrational or unrealistic, right? Any of those things, you can say, it seems that you think that all vegans act purely out of emotion instead of rational thought. But caring about others and being a rational person are not mutually exclusive. Now, I value justice and compassion as a vegan. My actions as a vegan are aligned with those values. That seems rational to me. So naming and reframing the stereotype breaks its power. So I'm going to invite you to think about some of the stereotypes that you've had applied to you and how you could name and reframe them in this way, right? So call out what it is that they're doing, which is taking one particular behavior, applying it as a character trait to all vegans, and then showing how you yourself are in fact not that negative thing, but showing the positive side, the flip side of that negative stereotype. And if you can, also demonstrate to them that you can see those same values or positive character traits in them. Okay, so that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is creating connection and understanding, okay? Because projection creates disconnection and distance between vegans and non-vegans. Right? They label us with a negative stereotype that they believe, and that makes us the bad guy in their eyes. Someone who thinks badly of them, who wants them to change, who wants to control them, who wants to do them essentially harm in some way by taking away something that is important to them. So disconnection results when people feel unsafe around us, when they feel threatened by our intentions towards them. And unfortunately, that's what projection creates. We can counter this by making the conversation feel emotionally safe for them. Now, those of you who've been following me for a while know that I teach an approach to speaking with non-vegans that follows a 3-step process. And that process is all about creating emotional safety, connection, and mutual understanding. It is the perfect counter to the disconnection that projection creates. Now, my process leans into curiosity first, then into compassion, and then also seeks permission before giving information. This is what it looks like in practice, given the situation where a person is projecting a negative stereotype onto you, okay? So I'm going to give you an example of how I do the curiosity and compassion piece in this setting. Curiosity involves asking questions in search of genuine understanding. Okay, so what this might sound like is, what leads you to believe that vegans as a group are all judgmental? What leads you to believe that vegans are anti-farming? What makes veganism seem extreme or irrational to you? What interactions have you had with vegans that have led to this perception of them as a group? Questions that are phrased like this are powerful questions because they prompt the person to look within. and examine their own thoughts and beliefs. Now, often a level of awareness will start to dawn for them just from answering these questions. Often they will realize that the beliefs that they hold about vegans don't actually have solid foundations. Now, once we've engaged our curiosity and we've asked them these powerful questions, we're going to receive some information in response to those questions. Once we have that information, now we get to step into compassion. And this starts by validating their feelings. Yes, even those feelings that come from misunderstanding and from biased and inaccurate beliefs about us, their feelings are real for them and they need to be acknowledged if we are to close that gap of disconnection. We also need to demonstrate our understanding of them by sharing just a little bit about ourselves, right? To show how we are more similar than different. And we need to position ourselves on the same side of the fight by highlighting shared values. Because this helps them realize that being vegan doesn't make us the bad guy. It actually means that we are more alike rather than different. When they identify with us, they are far more likely to listen to us, right? Because we're not very likely to listen to someone we can't identify with. Next, we get to create the opening for change. We might not be able to get all people there, but if we've got this far, we get to share a snippet of our own transformation story from non-vegan to vegan, right? This gives them that glimpse of the possibility that maybe they too could change. So what this all might sound like in practice is this. I'm going to give you some example sentences for each of these steps. So validating their feelings is as simple as saying, I can see why you might feel that way. That's it. I can see why you might feel that way, right? Demonstrating your understanding of them might simply sound like, I didn't feel this way at first either. I used to think what you think and feel the same way, right? You don't need to be any more specific than that. But then if you want to, you can share a bit more specific about your personal story. Now, to highlight your shared values, you might say, I think we both value justice, fairness, kindness, whatever it is that you've recognized in them. So you might say, I think we both value justice. Neither of us wants to see animals harmed needlessly. Right? That puts you on the same side of the fight. And then if you want to, you can create the opening for change. So you might now give your transformation story by saying, for me, being vegan aligns perfectly with those values that I think you and I share. Becoming vegan allowed me to feel far more at peace because now my actions align with those values. I'm no longer in conflict with my own values. Now, that is a connecting conversation. When people feel safe, their projections of us dissolve. They see that we are more alike than we are different, and rather than seeing us as the villain, they start to see us as maybe, possibly an example. Now, strategy number 3. This is actually very, very simple but essential. It is recentering the conversation back on the animals, right? So the reason this is important is that projection shifts people's attention onto you as the vegan and onto the perceived character flaws of all vegans. So your job is to shift it back onto the topic that you actually want to talk about. Now, this is actually very simple to do. After naming and reframing the stereotype, and hopefully connecting with a person around your shared values just a little, it's a matter of using a simple segue. Something like, but let's focus on the issue rather than on me. The ones that deserve the attention are the animals suffering and dying needlessly. Let's talk about them. What this sentence does is it just puts the moral spotlight back where it belongs. Today, I've shared with you an understanding of what the cognitive distortion of projection is and does in the minds of non-vegans, how it turns us into the bad guys and it gives them an excuse to shoot the messenger and then put the put the attention on the mess that the messenger has become. And I've shared with you the psychological mechanisms that projection uses to be so effective. And that is all about creating distance between us as vegans and non-vegans, and about shifting attention away from the real topic. So then I've given you 3 very solid communication strategies that you can use to counter that. Now, if you want to choose to ignore everything I've said so far and you just want like the one core takeaway that maybe you can apply, maybe you can memorize and just drop into any situation where you're being stereotyped, I'm going to give you one short, memorable line, okay? Okay, so you can simply say this: if I seem extreme, it's only because the system makes compassion look extreme. I'm not against you. I'm against unnecessary harm. Now let's talk about the issue, not about me. Okay, so if you want to memorize this as a little formula, you can drop whatever stereotype they've used into that sentence and whatever value it is that you want to highlight. So I've used the example of the stereotype being extreme and the value being compassion, but you can change that out for something else. If I seem, if I seem irrational to you, it's only because the system makes a desire for justice look irrational. Right? I'm not against you. I'm against unnecessary harm. Now let's talk about the issue, not about me. Okay, so this line interrupts the projection instantly. That's all I have for you for today. If you are watching on Facebook, let's continue this conversation in the comments. For those on YouTube, if you got value from this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share with whoever else needs to hear this. And also come join our Facebook community of Unstoppable Vegans if you want to be part of the conversation. Thanks everyone. See you next time.